Teal deer. Hobbes' justice does not understand teal deer, which is me. So this is going to get very confusing because he has made a reply video to my video, and to help you differentiate from the original clips made by me and the current ones, you are going to see this sign with that cunningly crafted 2.0 on it, which took me several hours to make in Photoshop, so you should appreciate that effort. Let's do this.
So, this YouTuber's name is Tildeer,
I feel like I'm internet famous.
and he makes like anti-feminist, anti-social justice videos. In the videos in which I'm responding, he's responding to a Lacey Green video, and it's pretty awful.
And you cunningly remove all of Lacey Green's samples in this, so it's even easier for you to take everything that I say completely out of context.
Now, the caveat to this is I have issues with Lacey Green. I just think Tildeer's objections to her and arguments that he makes are terrible.
Insert overly dramatic gasping sound here.
Also, there's a trigger warning for discussions of rape in this video.
Oh no, we're going to be discussing things that happen in the real world. If this upsets you, quickly flee to your Tumblr panic room. I, on the other hand, would like to add my own trigger warning here for people who are using headphones, because apparently this guy has absolutely no idea how to balance audio levels in his videos in editing, so I'm going to be trying to do that for him. Apologies if I kinda screw up a little bit. Teal deer. Lacey Green does not understand feminism. Let's look at why, shall we? And stereotypes exist for a reason.
Just because there might be some kind of flawed reasoning behind stereotypes doesn't make stereotypes okay.
It's not exactly flawed reasoning when there is actual evidence that those stereotypes are true, which kind of stops them from being stereotypes and makes them true. You can shout, "No fault, no fault, not all feminists are like that," as much as you like. But the reality is, if people behave in that way and associate themselves with that label, everyone who associates with that label is going to be associated with those people. You would. Secondly, those definitions that you have up on the screen really do not accurately reflect feminism and are much more of an egalitarian sentiment.
I actually agree with this. The definitions that Lacey Green offers are lacking.
It's a funny rebuttal video when you agree with what I'm saying. I really hope that you're not now going to list a load of first world problems or issues that don't even affect women and tell us that somehow feminism is going to save us all.
Hello, not as bad fallacy. Just because there are problems that are worse elsewhere does not invalidate criticism of those problems in the US.
So giving you a sense of scale is now considered a logical fallacy. Because as we all know, girls in the third world being abducted, gang-raped, and then sold into slavery is just as big an issue as how far apart a man keeps his knees on public transport in the first world. Received sex education in a public school, at no point was it mentioned that when a woman has sex she actually loses a part of herself. If anything, this is systemic of showing that women massively overvalue their own sexuality and indeed their own virginity.
And why do you think this is, Teal'Dear? Could it be cultural forces? What's your explanation for why this is happening?
I'm not exactly sure what your position is. I'm assuming that because you asked me the question, could it be cultural, that you are implying that it is cultural. However, you have provided no evidence of that being the case. I, on the other hand, have provided another video on my channel that proves my position using scientific evidence. You should probably go check that out.
Now, there's an especially ironic part of this video that I'm going to show now, because it's sort of hilarious in contrast with the previous clip.
So, anecdotal evidence is anecdotal.
So why is your anecdotal evidence better than hers, Teal'Dear? If you care about logic and reason, maybe you should provide statistics.
Yes, I need to provide statistics about what people are taught in sex education. I need to provide statistics on something that doesn't have any numbers involved. Or I could just introduce you to this thing called the national curriculum. You know, that thing that everyone has to learn. Therefore, my anecdotal evidence about what I was taught during sex education was in fact learned by everyone else in my country. Okay, there's a biological imperative for why this double standard exists, and I'm going to explain it as quickly as I can.
All aboard the evolutionary psychology train!
Now, I'm going to cut you off mid-sentence here because apparently you have no idea how to actually edit audio in your videos. But yes, there are such things as biological behaviors. Unless you are seriously suggesting that newborn babies root for food and cry for help, and that was a socially conditioned and culturally reinforced behavior.
Seriously, who's the scientist that you're going to cite?
For men, in nearly all societies throughout time, men have been the ones to approach and initiate contact in regards to pretty much anything when it comes to reproduction.
You said societies. I thought this was biological, Teal'Dear. That indicates cultural factors.
Once again, I'm going to have to cut you mid-sentence because you still have no idea how to edit audio in your videos. You are aware that evolved biological behaviors as a result of successful breeding programs and strategies are what form societies, right? And once again, I'm going to take a quick chance here to plug my video based on biological behaviors. One that you really should have watched before making this video reply, either in humans or in other animals. It is their biological role to seek out females and... Yeah, we know how this bit goes. Let's just skip to the end of it. Logical decisions about their life.
Not only is the is-ought problem, where Tildeer is trying to make statements on how things ought to be by merely how they are, or is, it's evolutionary psychology.
I have tried to follow that sentence so many times, and I just can't because it's completely incoherent.
I'm going to provide links on the bottom to Stephen Jay Gould essays, as well as a Rational Wiki article on the problems with EvoPsych.
Yeah, you should probably let someone else who can actually articulate their thoughts explain things for you. Then you can just nod along and agree. Firstly, that 1 in 4 statistic is absolute bullshit, and I'm not going to take the time debunking that because hundreds, literally hundreds of other people already have.
If hundreds of people have done it, why can't you link one? I'll link again below to RAIN's statistics on this, which indicate that 1 in 6 American women will be raped.
You mean that RAIN study where the person on the other end of the phone was the one who decided if the victim had been raped or not? You know, the one where they used really ambiguous questions such as, did you ever have sex when you were intoxicated? Did someone ever kiss you when you weren't entirely up for it? And then whenever the respondent answered affirmatively, it was the person at RAIN who put the tick in the box that said they were raped. But hey, don't just take my word for it. Here is the feminist author, Christina Hoff Sommers. Now, one important thing to note here, while she is talking about a study conducted by the CDC as opposed to one conducted by RAIN, it is kind of important to point out here that RAIN and CDC both used very similar research techniques when they came up with their numbers, which is why the 1 in 4, 1 in 5, 1 in 6 figures are all so shockingly close and totally at odds with actual crime figures.
The 1 in 5 rape figure comes from the National Intimate Partner in Sexual Violence Survey, released in 2011 by the Centers for Disease Control. Now, newspapers everywhere carried the alarming news. The CDC survey reported that in the United States in 2010, approximately 1.3 million women were raped and an additional 12.7 million women and men were victims of sexual violence. Now, former Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius hailed the report for giving what she called a clear picture of sexual violence in the United States. But was it a clear picture? First of all, the agency's figures are wildly at odds with the official crime statistics. The Justice Department's annual crime survey, which is the gold standard in crime research, it reports that there were about 188,000 rapes and sexual assaults in 2010. Where did the CDC find more than 1 million and nearly 14 million victims of sexual violence that professional criminologists somehow overlooked? It found them by using a poorly constructed telephone survey with a low response rate and a non-representative sample of respondents. No one interviewed was asked if they had been raped or sexually assaulted. Instead of such straightforward questions, the CDC determined whether the responses indicated sexual violation. Now, 61.5% of the women the CDC projected as rape victims in 2010 experienced what the CDC called, quote, alcohol and drug facilitated penetration. Now, what does that mean? I mean, if a woman was unconscious or incapacitated, then every civilized person would call it rape. But what about sex while inebriated? I mean, few people would say that intoxicated sex alone constitutes rape. Indeed, a non-trivial percentage of all customary sexual intimacy, including marital sex, probably falls under that definition. In short, by using a non-representative sample and vaguely worded questions, the CDC yielded the 1 in 5 lifetime rate and the 1.3 million female rape victims per year.
Thank you very much, Miss Sommers. And because she's a feminist and a woman, I guess I'm just going to have to listen and believe. Secondly, I defy you to find a single court case in which the defense, what was she wearing, has actually affected the outcome.
Lacey Green is not saying court cases. She's talking about society's reaction to rape victims when they say that they've been raped.
Oh look, it's almost like you're accusing me of making a straw man argument. The cool thing about this is that Lacey Green never actually proved that that is public consensus in every rape case. Finding and assessing all evidence when a crime has been committed is actually kind of like the job of police, including, in some cases, asking them what they were wearing. For example, if you tripped and fell while you were running and a police officer asks, "What were you wearing?" and you respond with, "high heels," there is no victim blaming in that question. It is merely people trying to find out how the situation came about in the location that it did. All information that is very important in criminal proceedings. And if you're making a complaint about the court of public opinion, then it's a damn good thing public opinion doesn't hold any sway in court. I actually agree that this is a feminist issue because there are several feminists out there who deny that men can even be raped.
Can you link me one? And then after you do that, can you show why they're representative of all feminism?
Well, I think the entire country of India is a good place to start. They have actually legally determined that men can never be raped, and it was entirely at the behest of feminists. As for proving that it's representative of the entirety of feminism, you really don't get why this series is entitled X Doesn't Understand Feminism, do you? I use feminists' own arguments to point out the glaring inconsistencies in their own feminist rhetoric, from one individual to another. Shock horror, some people are arseholes. As a side note, there are times that women have catcalled me in public when I'm out running. You know what I do? I ignore it because I'm a rational person and I don't care.
So I'm going to assume you're male, which is why you're privilege blind on this issue, but there's a case where a woman ignored catcalls and she was killed, which seems to indicate that in rational self-interest you would not ignore catcalls or do something.
Yes, I'm so blind to my own privilege. If only you had some empirical way of actually proving that I have it, as opposed to just using lots of nebulous terminology. And holy shit, you have found one case of a woman who got catcalled and murdered. Oh wow, that massively representative sample size sure has me convinced. And yes, I did once again cut you off mid-sentence because you still have no idea how to edit audio in your videos. And hey, I'm going to take my time to throw a little bit of your own thought process back at you. Just because you have found one example of a man who catcalled a woman and then went on to murder her, please show me how that is representative of the intent of every man who catcalls women. Guess your friends are just assholes then. Also, I'm pretty sure your first boyfriend did not sexually assault you because if he did, you would have gone to the police because sexual assault is a crime.
Okay, Taylor, this isn't okay.
The very fact that you have to start your point with the phrase, wow, just wow, like it's so glaringly obvious why I'm wrong and you're right that everyone should know it without any need for proof or evidence, kinda proves that you've probably already lost, because you require a big emotional appeal for acceptance before you've even begun.
You don't get to accuse somebody of lying about being raped because they didn't go to the police. Again, I'm going to link to Ryan's statistics in the bottom. 68% of sexual assaults go unreported. That doesn't mean that this 68% didn't happen, Tildir.
Yes, they are entirely unreported, but you know that they all happened. And once again, something about non-representative sample sizes and really shitty interviewing techniques, and not actually the person who was the victim of those things being the decider on whether or not they were raped. Because when you go to universities, you want students to do stupid things like sign consent forms while they're drunk and about to have sex. I'd laugh at you as well. In fact, I'm going to.
Where's Lacey Green say this?
Again, pointing out inconsistencies from one feminist to another, because it's hilarious. That is a combination issue of same group preference, which women have a lot more than men, and second of all, aspiration. If you're trying to sell a product to someone, men like looking at women, and women like looking at women. There have been several studies that have documented this over the years.
The first thing is I'd like a citation for this, and the second part is just because women prefer this or men prefer this doesn't make it okay.
You mean like this study? And also, just because people like it, that doesn't mean it's okay? I think I've heard this sentiment somewhere before. But seriously, you just have to deal with the fact that fashions for hair and body hair change. It is not uncommon these days for men to shave their body hair as well as women. Also, if you're doing this as some kind of smash the patriarchy, fight standardized beauty norms message, and then you appear in a video where you're wearing makeup with elaborately coiffed hair, it kind of loses its effect, doesn't it?
What does her appearance have to do with the point she's trying to make at all?
I don't know, maybe we should look at what was said before you decided to take my statement entirely out of context.
Because this shocks and terrifies people. I'm not even kidding. You should see some of the looks that I get.
So her complaint is that there is a general societal standard that women should shave their bodies, and she is fighting against this standardized beauty norm. And yet, in the same video, she has styled hair and makeup, showing that she is in fact supporting the standard beauty norm. And you don't see why this is a bit hypocritical, even a little? No, of course you don't. And now if you'll excuse me, because this has been going on for a while, I think I've earned myself a little bit of a treat.
Because this shocks and terrifies people.
Oh yes, that's it. You show that oppressive patriarchal beauty norm who's boss. Oral implants, ab implants, penis enlargement surgery.
Now, I don't want to straw man you, Tildir. Are you saying that these problems for men are just as bad as they are for women?
Well, unlike you, I don't consider cosmetic surgery to be a problem. However, given that increasing numbers of both men and women are electing to have cosmetic surgery, we should maybe consider that it is not only women who undergo cosmetic surgery to attract men, but that men are also doing the same thing to attract women. But of course, a woman who does something to get attention from men has it much worse than a man who does the same thing, because crippling self-esteem problems can only affect women. They can't possibly affect men, right? And yet, there are still a vast amount of women out there who express preference for circumcised penises, despite the horrendously barbaric act that it actually is. But hey, I guess we can just go cry some male tears, right?
So what if some women like it? That has nothing to do with the point.
Actually, it has everything to do with the point. Laws are only changed when societal pressure is large enough. If there are just as many people campaigning to have male genital mutilation made illegal as there are people who say male genital mutilation is fine, then it is not going to change. The fact that there are, therefore, women out there who are completely comfortable with a defenseless infant having a part of its body mutilated, that, to put it in nervous terms, is the equivalent of you having the tip of your finger cut off without anesthesia, for purely aesthetic reasons, is somewhat concerning. Overvaluing of female sexuality again.
And why do you think that happens, Tildir? You need to provide an explanation for what you're saying, or otherwise you're just asserting it.
Did a whole video on this, go and watch it. And that's just the way feminists like it. Women actually get to make choices about their body and have those choices enshrined in law, whereas men do not.
Since when do men not to get making choices about their body? And what feminist advocates that men shouldn't have body?
Infant male genital mutilation. Entirely legally endorsed. And the person who is having it done to them, who is only a few minutes old, has absolutely no say in whether or not the procedure is allowed to go ahead. Sure sounds like a loss of bodily autonomy to me, especially over a procedure that is largely done for cosmetic reasons. And yet, more women than men vote. Also, could I just point out that maybe if you actually ran for office and had a political career instead of making commentaries on the internet, maybe there'd be one more woman there.
The United States isn't a direct democracy. The amount of women voting doesn't make a difference because we don't vote on every single piece of legislation passed.
Considering the complaint that Lacey made was actually about the number of women in office positions and how they are massively outnumbered by men, that is why I have pointed out to you that more women than men vote. It is the voting electorate who are putting men into positions of power instead of women. So this is a point of yours where you have entirely missed the point of what I've said. Good job taking everything entirely out of context, though. So you mean to say that despite all of the affirmative action, women still aren't taking these top-rung jobs? It's almost like they don't want them.
Okay, but why don't they want them? Could it be cultural enforcement of traditional gender roles?
Again, you're doing this thing where you ask me a question almost like the question is supposed to be the answer, that you think it is entirely cultural, but you have not presented any evidence to prove that. Less than 5% of bin men, sewage workers, fishermen, lumberjacks, miners, and all those other really dangerous jobs, but you know what, let's just ignore that for now.
Yes. Why is that happening? Is it cultural enforcement of traditional gender roles, perhaps?
Again, with this implying questional thing that you're doing, where you actually provide no evidence any which way for anything, you're just kind of asking a question in this condescending tone, like I'm supposed to just agree with you by default, and you can't believe that I wouldn't. I mean that non-existent one.
The gender pay gap exists. I'm linking you to a Department of Labor statistics blog on the gender.
Once again, cutting you off mid-sentence because your editing skills suck. The gender pay gap does not exist. Take it away, Miss Summers.
And now for the mother of all feminist factoids. Women earn 77 cents for every dollar a man earns for doing the same work. Now, no matter how many times this wage gap claim is decisively refuted by economists, including feminist economists, it always comes back. The bottom line, the 23-cent gender pay gap is simply the difference between the average earnings of all men and women working full-time. It doesn't take into account differences in occupation, positions, education, job tenure, hours worked per week. When such relevant factors are considered, the wage gap narrows to the point of vanishing. Now, wage gap activists will say, no, women with identical backgrounds and jobs as men, they still earn less. But they always fail to take into account critical variables. I mean, why play this game? Now, all of these reckless claims are nearly impossible to correct because armies of advocates, journalists, political leaders, they depend on killer stats to promote their cause. And I guess there's also an admirable human tendency to be protective of women, and stories of female exploitation are readily believed. But killer stats undermine good causes, and they send scarce resources in the wrong direction. My advice to women advocates, take back the truth.
Actually, if they were in the exact same position, they would have earned the exact same amount of money.
Okay, look at the link I've provided you. No, they don't, and that's the point.
Okay, listen to some economists and people who actually know what they're talking about. It doesn't exist, and that's the point. I think what you're saying here is that by the time a woman reaches 60 and has retired, at which point a man would still actually be working, she would have done something like, I don't know, had kids and taken several years off of work, at which point that large pay gap would actually therefore be entirely accounted for. Also,
the adjusted pay gap accounts for this. I have, again, provided you a link that demonstrates this and explains the common misconceptions about the gender wage gap.
if you're going to constantly rely on a single source, I would suggest that your single source is actually correct before doing so. Well, if they're in the same workforce as you, they are potentially your competition. What's wrong with that? Men get told that they're in competition with each other all the time. You know what we do? We get on with it and we either win or we lose. I also fail to see how the media telling you something and you being stupid enough to actually believe it is an issue for feminism.
Feminism is promoting solidarity. This ties in with capitalism, which encourages this sort of competition and discourages cohesion and solidarity among groups. That is why this is a feminist issue.
So you've just said that feminism is encouraging everyone to think the same thing, considering that that is what solidarity actually means. In a society where everyone thinks the same things, nothing will be achieved, because there will be no competition nor need to do so. But hey, thanks for just admitting that feminism is basically just trying to convert the world into a giant clusterfuck hive mind that discourages individual thought. And those gender roles are actually observable from birth. Deal with it.
Biological determinism again. I swear you're just like Thunderfoot. Also, is ought problem again? And if you think I'm strawmanning you and these gender roles aren't biological, what is causing them?
You compare me to Thunderfoot as if that's supposed to be some sort of an insult. As for what causes behavioral patterns, oh, I don't know. Environments, stimulation, and then these little things that we have in our brains called hormones. You know, those things that you can actively take a syringe of, stick into someone's arm, and pump them full of things, and change how they behave. This is an issue for those people and their decriers, not feminism.
Do you know what intersectionality is, TLD? Because with what you just said, it's safe to assume that women can't be asexual, or bisexual, or transgender. I'm going to give you a link about the basics of intersectionality in the description.
Yes, I am well aware of what intersectionality is. It's a system based entirely on this idea that no matter who you are always going to be in some way either oppressed by people or be oppressing people. It is a sociological theory invented by feminists. which is why I think it is complete bullshit. And considering it is entirely theoretical and has no actual numbers or tangible results to support any of its theories, I'm just not convinced by it at all. So touting it as if it is some sort of concrete fact is just fucking ridiculous. Gay marriage and the legal rights of trans people are issues for gay people and trans people, not feminists.
Because feminists can't be gay or trans? Intersectional feminism seeks to tackle these issues simultaneously.
Now you see, things like homosexuality, bisexuality, asexuality, transsexuality, and all of that stuff, I have this belief that those things are all biologically determined within your brain. And you make it sound as if feminism is also something that is determined within your brain when it is not. In those instances, you are first and foremost a homosexual or a transsexual, and second of all, you are a feminist. The first of those things you deal with because you have to, because you have no choice. The second one you don't have to deal with because that is a personal choice. Do not confuse the two. Maybe because it represents the actual demographic of the society in which they live.
A citation for this would be nice.
Really, I have to give you a citation proving that white people outnumber everyone else in the Western world. Well, that was hard, wasn't it? Getting pissed off at injustice, and then there's getting pissed off over nothing. Can I also point out that when women stop using the "I'm on my period, so I'm allowed to be a bitch" excuse, men will also stop dismissing the times when women are bitches as just saying they're on their period.
When did Lacey Green make this excuse for why she's, to quote you, a bitch, Tildir? When did she do?
When did I mention Lacey Green in what I said? Oh, that's right, I didn't. Maybe you should stop misrepresenting what I'm saying. In fact, her point was this.
It's because when I dare to get pissed off at injustice, I'm just another angry feminist who's on her period.
So the point that she's making here is that people will dismiss her behavior, in some cases behavior that may be inappropriate, by claiming that she is on her period. And yet, the excuse of "I'm on my period" is an excuse frequently used by women to get away with inappropriate behavior. And they are so confident that this excuse is completely watertight that they will make jokes about it on the internet, as can be seen here. Hell, even the feminist website Jezebel points out that women use it as an excuse for their behavior. Can you see why I made the point that I did? No, of course you can't. You only believe in equality when it suits you. And yes, all of the massive problems that you've cited come from the third world. Yet you quite happily sit around complaining about problems in the first world, even when you know that there are these atrocities happening elsewhere.
Oh hey, it's another worse than fallacy. Relevant links are in the description.
Oh hey, look, it's you again trying to convince me that the volume of a man's flatulence, better known as fart rape, is just as bad as a woman being stoned to death for actually being raped. Nice to see that you're keeping all things in relative perspective here.
I don't know if I'm going to respond to any more of Tildir's videos because this one was just terrible.
Yeah, please don't. You've already made yourself look like far too much of an idiot already.